Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. We are taking a look back at Week 15 and giving you guys our biggest stats, trends, takeaways, everything that can help you win here in Week 16 in the fantasy playoffs. Or honestly, if you're out, let's just commiserate together. Let's just be sad together. Let's take a look at what's coming next year and how we could do better next season.
Are we already on to 2025? Is that where we're at?
Some of us are, Dave. Some of us are. Yep. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always. I got Dave Kluge, and then with us, we've got our special guest, Hutchinson Brown, with us. He was here last week as well as we went through all the games. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to go rapid fire through the gigantic list of games. No bye weeks this week. So this one is going to be a bit longer for us, guys. And, well, Hutch, why don't we have you kick us off? Let's take a look at last night's game where the Packers defeat the Seahawks. What was your biggest takeaway from this?
Yeah, it was a quite an interesting game. You know, Packers got off to an early lead, and then it kind of just fell apart from there for Seattle. Geno Smith got hurt, and that's the big thing I want to talk about is what is Sam Howell going to do for this offense? You know, we watched Sam Howell last year. I mean, he had a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns in his time in Washington, but it was a lot of sacks taken, a lot of interceptions, a lot of messy plays. And when you watched him in the Seattle game, obviously it was a game where Seattle was already kind of over already. They were down by multiple scores. It was later in the game. But Sam Howell looked dysfunctional, man. I mean, like people were complaining about Geno the entire game, and then Sam Howell came in. They were like, "We need Geno back." I mean, it was really, really, really bad. I think the thing is when you look at next week, they play the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm really afraid for that matchup. You know, you see good matchup for fantasy wide receivers. You might be tempted to start Metcalf and JSN and be excited for them. But the thing is, the Vikings blitz at one of the highest rates in the league, and they put the most pressure on quarterbacks in the league this year. And I think Sam Howell's not going to do very well with that. He struggled with that in Washington. He took a lot of sacks and he threw a lot of interceptions. So I think JSN is startable here because, you know, you look at the way JSN plays, he's an all-around great wide receiver, but he runs specifically very good in those short ranges of the field. And that's going to be an area where Sam Howell is going to be able to take advantage when there's a lot of blitzes, a lot of people coming in, linebackers coming in. Those short areas, those middle area of the fields are likely going to be more open more often. So I think JSN's okay as a flex, but Metcalf, we talked about him last week. You know, he's been really struggling with JSN emerging as the wide receiver one in Seattle. I don't think you start him next week, even in a prime matchup with Minnesota, who's been really poor in the secondary. I don't see a big play or a touchdown coming for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's where DK Metcalf is now. He's kind of a boomer bust wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Jason has really taken over as the clear-cut wide receiver 1 here. But I think my biggest takeaway is we don't know if Kenneth Walker's coming back next week or not. Sounds like he hopes to, but, you know, there's also the whole getting second opinions on his calf. You know, they're trying to figure out ways to work around it. If Sam Howell is the quarterback, I'm terrified to start Zach Charbonnet because so much of his value comes in the receiving game. And if you guys watch yesterday, I mean, I was hyper focused on it because I have Zach Charbonnet in a ton of fantasy leagues. There were so many times where Zach Charbonnet is just wide open in the flat with his hands out, like waiting for the ball, and Sam Howell would just collapse and take a sack. So his pocket presence is so bad that I think that's one of the biggest things you'll lose out from with Zach Charbonnet. When Geno's in the pocket, he is a mature, cerebral quarterback. He knows when to get rid of the ball and get it down to his check down guy. Sam Howell just panics and takes the sack. So we saw 7 targets last week, which Zach Charbonnet caught all of them. And then in this week, we saw almost no check downs to Zach Charbonnet. We saw a handful of kind of throwaways that counted as targets. But that's my big fear, is that if Sam Howell has to start next week, it really lowers the ceiling for Zach Charbonnet because of what he does in the receiving game.
The Minnesota matchup, too, is not fun for the run game. I mean, Minnesota's been one of the most locked down teams in terms of the rushing game this year. So you've got that playing into it as well. So I agree with you, Dave, there that if assuming Kenneth Walker is out, I'd be really scared to start Zach Charbonnet. And if Kenneth Walker is in, I'd be scared to start Kenneth Walker in that match. You're probably forced to, but I'm not feeling good about it.
And the best way to beat the blitz is with, you know, quick processing and short throws directly over the blitz. And I have zero faith in Sam Howell to be able to execute that.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
It looked so bad. So bad with Sam Howell out there on the field. I think it was like 1 out of his 5 drives was completed with a score, and that was because we get the big run with Zach Charbonnet, where
all 3 and outs. Like it was just 3 plays and punt. I mean, it was bad.
Yeah, not great. And it was like, Dave, you mentioned the way things could be shaping up for Zach Charbonnet. It's not even that he wasn't getting targeted that often, is that even when he was getting targeted, it wasn't even close. Sam Howell was just going in there ripping balls 3 yards away from Zach Charbonnet. It wasn't even close. So that's going to be a little bit worrisome. I think the only guy, like you guys said, that you really have to start going forward for this team ends up being Jackson Smith-Njigba. You ride the horse that got you there.
And I
Dave,
think, you can't the tough thing, like, you can't bench DK Metcalf, and if Kenneth Walker is active, you can't bench him,
I
and if
think you
Kenneth
can.
Walker's not active, you probably can't afford to bench Charbonnet either. I mean, like, if you've got a super deep roster, yeah, like, in theory, it sounds great to say, just bench everybody, but I don't think a lot of people are gonna have an option better than DK Metcalf or Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet, and I think people are just gonna have to start them and take their lumps.
I think the difference is that DK Metcalf has been bad for a while now for
Yeah,
fantasy, not as a player, but
Yeah,
it's been rough for fantasy for a while now. So you probably have come up with a few better options. I think he's more benchable than Zach Charbonnet is if Ken Walker's out. I almost
would
feel like you
agree.
have to start Zach Charbonnet, just the
yeah.
off chance he runs for a touchdown. All right, next game on here, Dave. Bucks defeat the Chargers. Biggest takeaway from this?
My biggest takeaway from this game, I don't know. Got quite a few takeaways, but I think the biggest one is probably that Cade Otton has really been phased out as we've seen the emergence of Jalen McMillan. And we talked a little bit about this last week, but here it is again. Jalen McMillan, getting more targets, scoring the touchdown. And I looked to see if Cade Otton's usage has changed at all, and it really hasn't. I mean, we saw him run more routes and become a little bit more involved when Chris Godwin went out. The difference is he's still running the same amount of routes out of the slot and the same amount of slots or routes out wide that he was, prior to McMillan kind of heating up. But McMillan is just getting more open, and that is making him a more favorable target for Baker Mayfield. So I think a lot of people, got to this point in the fantasy playoffs with a Baker and Cade Otton stack, which was just a money printing machine for about a month. But I think for people that are rostering Cade Otton and in the playoffs now, I think a lot of them should be going to the waiver wire heading into week 15,
I
week
agree there. I
16.
love that call. I wanted to talk about Jalen McMillan, man. He just seems a lot more comfortable in this offense the last couple weeks, 13 targets. And then you look at the fantasy points, 20.9 to 18.5. He's someone that you might be able to stream for the next couple weeks based on the matchups, based on, how you're looking on your teams. But I completely agree with you there that it seems like a new second option this offense has stepped up since Chris Godwin has gone out. It started K. Dotton, and now it looks like Jalen McMillan, the young wide receiver, has stepped up and made the plays. And I would agree with you, Dave, that if you have Cade on right now, you want to look to the waiver wire.
Let's put this into context. I would start Jalen McMillan over DK Metcalf next week.
Yeah, I would too.
And I think that's a very realistic thing. If you've had DK Metcalf, you're probably out there looking for some wide receiver help. You end up with a guy like Jalen McMillan. I'd easily start him. And guys, I think Baker Mayfield, to stick with the Buccaneers here, was he the best pick as a quarterback for fantasy football this year? He was a guy that I don't even know that people picked him. I think he was a waiver wire ad for most people in the first couple weeks.
I think Jaden Daniels, who was going in like round 12, was probably a better pick than Baker.
Baker Mayfield is ahead of Jaden Daniels in the year in points per game.
Yeah, I mean, there was that low little stretch for Jaden Daniels while he was struggling, but I mean, he's just been tearing it up. I think the spike weeks you're getting from Jaden Daniels,
Baker
I know
Mayfield
Baker is too, but
Baker Mayfield has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games with 28 or more fantasy points. Like the spike games are really there for him too.
yeah, he's outscoring it. Yeah, I'm looking right now, 0.7 points per game. That's pretty surprising. I would not have expected that.
And to be like and a guy that was basically undrafted. I think late round quarterback is so back. Late round
Oh
quarterback
yeah,
is more back than it has ever been with Baker Mayfield, Jaden Daniels. Keep going down the list here.
Jared Goff.
Sam Darnold, Bo Nix, Jared Goff. It's back.
And look,
It's so
yeah, I mean, and then looking at the early quarterback ranges this year, you had CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Patrick Mahomes, some big bust picks in the early rounds this year. Some guys that we really were hoping to step up that just crushed you. So yeah, late round quarterback might be back. We might have that back.
Kyler, Brock, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
Kyler and Brock
I
Purdy
I don't
too.
think the only people that felt good paying up for a quarterback this year were those that took Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, which we kind of knew that, and Lamar
Lamar.
Jackson. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
like we knew that there was going to be a fall off after them. Even Joe Burrow, who's been red hot recently, who was really kind of a liability early in the season. So yeah, I think we talked about it a lot. Alfredo this offseason, just kind of double tapping quarterbacks late. That definitely seems to be the way to go.
yeah, it's pretty sad to look at how Kyler Murray's fizzled here down the stretch. Not great. All right, next game on here. I'm looking at the Bills beating the Lions, and this might have been the best fantasy football game of the season. The way that all these teams, they're so much fun to watch, the way they produce. Jared Goff goes out there, and like it actually sucks that one of these teams had to lose because Jared Goff goes and has one of the best games of his career. Josh Allen is the entire Bills offense. Like he just is. I know James Cook had himself a good game. Just to give you guys the rundown, both quarterbacks over 40 points. Both of the lead running backs over 25 fantasy points. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 30 fantasy points in this one. Has the massive blow up game that we've been wanting from him. If you made it to the playoffs with him, he gets you to the next round most likely. My biggest takeaway from this is I think Amari Cooper's toast. I think he's done. And I don't even know if it's a skill thing. I just don't even see why the Bills are not using him.
I mean,
I just think
14
there's
targets the week before. we talked. It's crazy that he'll just go from like
it's
being the focal point of the offense one week to just nothing the next.
Yeah, it's kind of
you can't trust him.
Yeah, it's kind of how this Bills offense has run a little bit this year. We've seen a lot of inconsistency from this receiver throughout. There's no Stephon Diggs in this offense where it's like we know there's a guy that's getting consistent targets every week. It seems like Khalil Shakir has earned that role as being the most consistent. But yeah, I agree with you, Alfredo, that Amari Cooper, like since they've gotten him, acquired him, there's been very few games to take away where you've been happy for fantasy and happy in terms of his involvement. We saw 14 targets last week, but it just disappeared this week against a really optimal Detroit Lions matchup that have been really poor on the secondary, really injured on the secondary this year. So, yeah, I don't think you're starting Amari Cooper for the next couple of weeks, most likely, unless you're desperate for a flex play.
And I mean, Khalil Shakir has been a blessing this year, like where
Yeah.
he was getting drafted in like the wide receiver 50 range. You've been getting consistent wide receiver 2 production from him all year, and that's great. But he's the wide receiver 1 on, the arguably the best offense in the league, and he's still giving you kind of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 bubble production every single week. Patrick Mahomes is just in his like, late career Mahomes, late career Brady phase where he doesn't need a wide receiver 1. Like he is just playing Superman out here. Like he will throw the ball to anybody with a pulse. We saw Ty Johnson lead the team in receiving yards yesterday. He's got
Dave, we need to fix something here. You
Yeah,
said Patrick
yeah.
Mahomes is in his late stage Brady career, and then
You said
proceeded to
I
talk
would
about all
say
the Bills.
Josh Allen is in his
yes.
late
There you
stage
go.
Mahomes, late stage Brady career.
Got
Where
it.
like there isn't a clear cut wide receiver 1. He's just
Yeah.
spreading the
Okay,
wealth
because I
around to
had more
everyone.
questions after that
Me
too.
and
'Cause I was like,
Alfredo's
I've never seen Tom Brady run
people
like this.
people watching the
No, no, no.
YouTube saw me and Alfredo's face. Like our faces both
No, not
went like what at the
I mean,
same
he's
exact time.
running,
It's
but it's
pretty
just
great.
the fact that, like, he doesn't have a wide receiver 1. He's just
Yeah.
spreading the ball around, whether it's Mac Hollins or Dalton Kincaid or Dawson Knox or whoever is open is getting the ball. And I think that's when you really take that step from being like a good quarterback to a great quarterback, when you don't need a Stephon Diggs or an A.J. Brown. Like, you can just go out there and play with anybody and get it done. And he's doing that right now. He's got 5
Yeah.
rushing touchdowns and 5 passing touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's just incredible what he has been doing. So that's my takeaway, is that next year, draft Josh Allen as the QB1 yet again with utmost confidence. And, my guess is that Khalil Shakir is probably going to get pretty steamed up in drafts next year. And if he is going in that kind of wide receiver 30 range, as much as I love Shakir, I don't think I'm going to want to pay up for it, because the reality is this ball is going to be getting spread everywhere. We're going to see Kincaid get more comfortable in the offense. We're going to see Keon Coleman's role grow. And I don't know if I'm going to want to draft any Bills wide receivers inside the top 30 next year.
Khalil Shakir, wide receiver 26 in fantasy right now, ahead of Cooper Kupp, Marvin Harrison Jr., Calvin Ridley, Devontae Smith, George Pickens, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf. Crazy. Dave, do you think they go into next season with this exact same wide receiver core? Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Amari Cooper. Like, do they continue to add pieces?
I don't think Amari Cooper's coming back, but I mean, they already invested pretty serious draft capital into Kincaid and into Coleman. So I don't think they'll go back. I think they're pretty happy with where they're doing it now. I mean, Josh Allen's putting together an MVP level season with the group that they have. I don't see any reason to really add more to it. I mean, they were able to pick Mac Hollins up, the scrap heap in the middle of free agency, and turn him into a weapon. I don't think it matters who's catching passes in Buffalo. As long as you got Josh Allen, I don't think there's any reason to invest premium draft capital or salary cap into the receiver position.
All right, let's go to the next game on here. Hutch, the battle for the great state of Pennsylvania. Eagles beat the Steelers. I see you got your hat on.
Mm-hmm.
I made sure that you get to talk about this game. Biggest takeaway from this Eagles victory over Pittsburgh.
Yeah, my Philadelphia Eagles got the win. And just a quick stat for you for the Eagles, 10 points in the first quarter. They've been averaging 1.3 first quarter points per game all year. So I was very happy to see the Eagles finally do something in the first quarter. But my big takeaway from this game, we talked about it a little bit last week. The Steelers' backfield split is really, really concerning for fantasy. Jalen Warren's a massive problem for Najee Harris. And specifically, when you look at the last 2 weeks, he has straight up outsnapped Najee Harris. Like, we're getting to that point where he is outsnapping Najee Harris and he runs more routes than Najee on a very regular basis. He gets more targets than him on a very regular basis. So it leads Najee to being a 14, 18 carry per game kind of guy. And with Baltimore and Kansas City coming up as the next two matchups, I mean, like, if he doesn't score a touchdown, there's no chance he's getting to 10 fantasy points. Like, there's no chance. When the Steelers are in competitive games, you see Jaylen Warren on the field more because they're passing the ball more. And as a result, that's Jaylen Warren's game. You're putting him on the field more often than Najee. So I just don't see a world where Najee Harris scores 10 plus fantasy points in each of the next 2 weeks without a touchdown. And as a result, he becomes a very desperate flex play.
Yeah, go for it, Dave.
Yeah, I was going to say that was my biggest takeaway as well. I mean, Najee Harris led the backfield in fantasy points with 3.1 PPR points, and we saw Cordell Patterson getting involved. Jalen Warren's there, and we talked about this like 3 weeks ago, and we said if you got Steelers running backs, it's not crazy to think about dropping them and letting your league mates deal with that headache because their stretch or their schedule down the stretch is just absolutely brutal. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the bigger takeaway is from here. I mean, we saw AJ Brown and Devonta Smith come back to life, which was great.
Finally.
Jalen Hurts was able to, get it done as a passer and quiet those concerns. But the biggest takeaway here is that if you're able to squeeze into the next round with these Steelers running backs, you just feel terrible about it.
Can we do something? Can we commit to a bit here where each week we are just going to start different rumors about a quarterback and wide receiver that are not like they're not getting the points we want in fantasy, so that week they can just go out and shut everyone up? Because this AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts thing was getting really blown out of proportion to the point where people are like AJ. I mean, maybe not, maybe it is, and then they just go out and play and everything's all good, but there's all the talk about how AJ Brown was removing the Philadelphia Eagles stuff from his Instagram, and Nick Sirianni is getting them together for togetherness meetings of things we can do together, including touchdown celebrations. And they just go on, they just play, and they're great. Can we commit to this bit?
Did you see the thing with Sirianni trying to rip into Jalen Carter
That was
after,
wild.
and like the defensive line coach? So Jalen Carter had a play where, he's a very physical player where he just wound up and just clubbed an offensive lineman in the side of the head. And there was no flag. But after the play, Nick Sirianni was heated and he was walking over to the defensive line groups to, rip into Jalen Carter. And the defensive line coach stood up and like got in Sirianni's face and they were like yelling at each other. And the defensive line coach would not let Sirianni through to get to Jalen Carter. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Like somehow the Eagles are just out here steamrolling teams. Like they're going to get a 1 or a 2 seed in the NFC, but somehow the vibes are just atrocious. Like there's something wrong
Yeah.
in Philly and they keep winning and they keep doing it in, big games, but there's just something weird happening there. Can't put a finger on it.
Yeah, let's go back to Alfredo, what you were saying. This is coming up before Monday Night Football. So let's talk Kirk Cousins, man. Can't throw the football. Drake London has been terrible for face. Let's hope that against Vegas they get that going. That'd be nice for some Monday Night miracles for somebody, please. And then we're gonna see Kirk Cousins get Benjamin game. That's gonna be
We
terrible.
need more time. We need more time,
Yeah,
Hutch.
shoot.
It needs to boil up throughout the week. We'll
All
pick
right,
someone else.
maybe next week.
We'll pick some. I think I might have one.
I need
for
Drake
later
London
on
to
in
do
the
something,
show.
man. I'm in trouble.
I might have one for later on in the show. I'm just going to say that. All right, Dave, next game on here. Broncos defeat the Colts. Biggest takeaway from this one?
Anthony Richardson stinks. He's so bad. I
Ooh.
mean, like you'll get the blow up games every now and then because he'll rush some touchdowns in, and he got that yesterday. He had the rushing touchdown and had 46 yards on the ground, but it's 17 of 38, 2 picks, can't even crack 200 yards, can't throw for a touchdown. I understand, like he's a developmental guy, he's raw. They're giving it time, but missed most of his rookie season. Like I'm trying to be as sympathetic as I can here, but I don't know, man. I watch him and like he makes some really fun throws, and we know that he is an athlete, but I just don't think he's the long term answer for the Colts.
I agree here, Dave. I mean, we're seeing the same Anthony Richardson we saw in college. We've seen it his entire NFL career, basically. The short, easy throws he misses on a regular basis. He
Mhm.
makes some plays downfield, but often he misses them. But when he hits them, it's fun. But the rest of the game, you're just like, when is Anthony Richardson going to throw a pick? When is he going to miss this easy 3rd and 5 pass? Like, it's just, he just misses too many throws way too often. He also makes a lot of mental mistakes as well. He throws some balls in some really, really unnecessary areas. He gets a lot of dangerous throws in there, and it's just it's a struggle to watch him play. I agree with you, Dave. I was going back through the all 22 film this morning, looking through Anthony Richardson, watching him. It's just like, yo, he does not look good. He does not look good right now, man.
And if you are watching the show right now and you lost your playoff matchup by less than 8 points and you had Jonathan Taylor in your lineup,
Oh,
I'm
man.
sorry. Just let
Yeah,
it
sorry about
sit.
that one. Yeah.
Alfredo, you saw that, right?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
brutal. Like, you get that from a guy like Malachi Corley, right? Like, his first NFL touch, he's all amped up. Like, dude, Jonathan Taylor, like, you've been in the league too long,
Come on.
man. Like, you're a team captain. Like, how I don't understand how somebody like Jonathan Taylor makes that mistake.
I liked his ownership of it after, though. The press was, going after him pretty hard in the locker room after it, and he was like, "Yep, I messed up. That was a mistake. That can't happen." And I also saw a parlay someone put down. It was like $9.50 parlay for like $4,000. And it was like a 10-leg parlay, and it was Jonathan Taylor touchdown, and he would have hit it, and Taylor missed out.
Ugh.
It was brutal, bro. Brutal.
I had someone in one of my dynasty leagues say that if I lose by less than 6 points, I'm trading Jonathan Taylor to the first person that sends me an offer. It doesn't even have to be a good one. Like, people are down bad
Yeah.
right now. Which, by the way, I just want to go back to the Anthony Richardson thing really quick that we were talking about. I think it's funny where we need to kind of create those dividing lines where we do say, let's give these quarterbacks time to develop. But then at the same time, let's add the context that if all of the fans of the college team that this player was on are out here saying, like, why did he get drafted so high? He's not that good. Maybe we should listen to him. Like a Bryce Young, where he's leading Alabama and Alabama fans stick by their guy. Then I mean, obviously Bryce is turning it around. He looks pretty good. Anthony Richardson kind of didn't have any supporters going into the NFL except for the fantasy managers that were like, oh my gosh, rushing. This is going to be so good. And now here we are. Obviously, he could still develop, but we kind of have to listen to the people that have been watching these players day in and day out for years.
Yeah, my wife's family, she's got a bunch down in Gainesville, and we were just recently there a couple of months ago, and they were all kind of asking me, they know that I'm big into fantasy football, and they were like, do you know why Anthony Richardson was drafted where he was? Because we don't really understand. And that's, everybody, big time Gators fans down there.
Yeah. It's wild. All right. Next game on here. Looking at the Chiefs beating the Browns. There's two main takeaways that I have from this, and I'll make them really quick. One, I think going forward, there's not really going to be anyone that I want in fantasy for the Chiefs going into next season, except for maybe Rashee Rice, because everything just looks meh in terms of fantasy for them. Patrick Mahomes is like quarterback 10 on the season. The running back situation, even when Isaiah Pacheco has been in, it hasn't been great.
Kareem Hunt out touched him yesterday.
Yeah.
Not good.
I mean, Xavier Worthy, just I don't know what that's going to turn into. DeAndre Hopkins, don't know what that's going to turn into. It seems like he's kind of cooked as well. Travis Kelce, tight end 7 on the season, averaging 1 more point per game than Zach Ertz, the tight end 13. Like, that's the big difference for these guys that fantasy managers were investing in. I just don't want to have to invest in this offense anymore. They might be great for real football and have their whole dynasty, the legacy, all that fun stuff. I just don't really care about it for fantasy.
No.
And the other side of this was this game. Jerry Jeudy continues to be an absolute star in fantasy football and in the NFL right now. And I think if I saw this correctly, he was 4th in the NFL in receiving yardage prior to this game. And I would not be surprised if that has gone up.
I mean,
he has
number 1 in receiving since Jameis took over. He's the number 1 receiver in the NFL. Just crazy.
And so that kind of brings me to my question here. After a big performance, 11 catches, 108 yards, 14 targets, wide receiver 9 on the season overall, wide receiver 23 in fantasy points per game. Is he a legit top 20 option going into next year? Or is this a guy that it's a circumstance of Jameis, the Browns where they're at right now, the injuries around him, the trading of Amari Cooper? Where's your confidence level at with for Jerry Jeudy next season, Dave?
2 weeks ago, I would have said very high because it seemed like Jameis was kind of their guy. We talked about him being like just the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Deshaun Watson when it comes to likability and character and all these sorts of things. Like, it would have been really nice for them to have a year with Jameis. It would have gotten the fans excited. But man, the way Jameis has played these last couple of weeks, I don't know if they're going to say this is who we want to run it back with in 2025. So really, it's quarterback dependent. Like, if it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson starting the season, I don't want Jameis. I don't know what their plan is.
Give us Sam Darnold. Give us Sam Darnold in Cleveland.
Yo.
You know who I think would be great? It would make so much sense, and I don't know if there's any way for them to pull it off, but Baker Mayfield in this offense, could you imagine like how well that would work? Like, just a good quarterback who could run the offense. Yeah, it would. It almost makes too much sense, but yeah, it's really going to be quarterback dependent because what we've seen from Jerry Jeudy is 4.5 years of mediocrity. And now we have seen half a season where he's just blowing it up with Jameis Winston. And, if they get another gunslinging quarterback in there, maybe I'll be, a little bit warmer on Jerry Jeudy, but we just haven't seen him consistently produce with anybody in his career besides Jameis.
Yeah, something's in the water in Denver, man, because Russ is leaving Denver, going off in Pittsburgh, having a great year. Then Jerry Jeudy leaving Denver, going off in Cleveland. Yeah, this is I agree with Dave. This situation is entirely dependent on what the Browns team looks like next year. I don't think it's out of the picture for them to draft a wide receiver or add a wide receiver as well. Outside of Jerry Jeudy is a little, I mean, Elijah Moore, you have David Njoku, you have Cedric Tillman, who's been in and out. Like, there's a chance they add a wide receiver in the draft or in free agency upcoming, but yeah, I would agree that this is mostly situation dependent. Also, can we just today at some point have a moment of silence for Nick Chubb? Broke his foot, unfortunately, in this
Mhm.
game. I mean, I think that's it
It's
for his career, unfortunately. I mean, it already wasn't looking that good this year, but it's just so sad, man. I saw a video today. It was like the first few moments after Nick Chubb's injury where he was on the ground, and then it was just a sad song of Nick Chubb highlights. I was nearly in tears. I was so sad. I was really, really sad watching that.
Dave,
Really,
you're muted, pal.
remember my first podcast?
That's a tough one to come back from, and we've seen these foot injuries like really zap the explosiveness out of players in their first year back. So if he's going to be on that Mark Andrews, Tank Dell, Tony Pollard trajectory, that means next year, which is his age 30 season, is going to be kind of a bumpy path. And then all of a sudden, we're hoping that he can just rewind the clock at age 31 and come back from back-to-back season-ending injuries. Yeah, Nick Chubb, great player, but like you said, Hutch, this could unfortunately kind of be the end of the road. We might see him retread with a few teams here and there, but I don't think we're ever going to see the Nick Chubb of old again.
No.
Hutch, you don't know this, but I've read it that after the age of 25 years old, cells begin to die in your body. And being 30 and playing football, which by the way, that's incorrect. I've already Googled it as I was saying it. And it's, but that was the rumor going around, and everyone in like me and Dave's generation was basically like, okay, cool. So we're 85 now. Like instantly. We're just that's how much we have left. So yeah, hearing Nick Chubb going through all these injuries, his age 30 season. Dave, we don't recover the way we used to. I can't imagine being any of these football players and having to go through that stuff. So yeah, it's not looking good for him.
Yeah, I mean, like I've been talking about. I've been skiing a lot this winter. I wiped out pretty hard on Saturday, and I stood up and I had a little pain in my knee, and it's like a very very dull pain. Where a younger me would have been like, oh, no big deal. But now at 34, I'm like, well, time to get down to the mountain. Get down to base, take the rest of the day off, and then wake up in the morning. Knee still hurts. Here we are 2 days later. Knee still hurts, and I'm like, great, cool. So now I just have a bad knee for the rest of my life. That's fun.
I definitely feel very much like it's 1700s, 1800s, where it's like life expectancy was about 45, and it's feeling like an elder. That's yeah, that's how it is. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Hutch, Cardinals beat the Patriots.
hmm
Biggest takeaway from this one?
I think the biggest takeaway from me, I mean, we've been talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. and his struggles. We've just been waiting and waiting and waiting for the breakout. And I'm like, it's not coming. Like, I think Marvin Harrison Jr., he's seen 8 targets per game in the last 4 weeks, and he has done almost nothing with them. He had a nice touchdown a couple weeks ago that led him to 17 PPR fantasy points, but otherwise, he's been under 10 fantasy points and he's been under 10 fantasy points in 7 games this year, guys. That's more than half of his games that he's played. It's just like, what are we doing? Like, I think at this point, he's in the DK Metcalf tier where he's a boom bust wide receiver 3, where if you get a big player a touchdown, you're feeling all right. But otherwise, you're just not feeling it. And with how Kyler Murray's played, how on and off he's been, I don't think it's going to happen. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is becoming like, yeah, a desperate flex play.
How much of this is like a Kyler thing too? Because I know that throughout the season, a lot of what the Cardinals have been doing is sending Marvin Harrison downfield on these deep shots, and that was something like Kyler's never really truly succeeded with a guy like that. Even with his success with DeAndre Hopkins, it was stuff underneath, over the middle. He's always had an affinity for tight ends. I mean, at some point, I mean, maybe it's just going to take a little bit more time, and going into year 2, we can see these guys improve. But this was a really big disappointment for year 1, and I tend to put a bit more of this on Kyler as the quarterback, because it's not like anyone else is truly succeeding in this offense. Trey McBride is getting his targets, but he can't even score touchdowns. Like, the offense is still struggling itself. I put a lot of this on Kyler, But yeah, the Marvin Harrison fantasy value is super disappointing.
Yeah, I just looked it up. I don't know if this is a common stat. I haven't seen it anywhere yet, but Trey McBride now holds the record for the most receptions
Yeah.
in a touchdown-less season. Yeah, he
Beautiful.
has had 89 receptions with 0 touchdowns, passing up Deontay Johnson, who was the former record holder with 86. James Wilder in 1984 did it on 85 touchdowns, and Roger Craig in 1986 did it on 81 touchdowns. The only players in NFL history to have 80+ receptions and no touchdowns in a year. So at this point, it's just comical. Like I don't want him to catch a touchdown now. Like finish the year, like go crack 100 and not score and get your name in the record books, because that's about all this Arizona Cardinals team is going to be remembered for.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's approaching the yardage record too. I was looking up these stats a couple weeks ago, and I saw it, Dave, that if he hits 86 receptions, he's going to break the record. I think at yardage, he's approaching that record too for most yards, receiving yards without a touchdown. But yeah, it's weird. I think back to what you were saying, Alfredo, blaming on Kyler for Marvin. I think partially it is his fault, but I think also Marvin's usage is frustrating too, because the Arizona Cardinals are consistently pushing him downfield and not opening up easy opportunities to get him the ball. Because to get a receiver going, you want to get a few shorter area passes just to try to get him going, get some momentum going. It doesn't feel like they're doing that. They're just setting him downfield and saying, hey, if you want to take a shot downfield, go for it. But if not, you're just not going to get the ball. And it's just like, why are we doing this with Marvin? Like, this is your 4th overall pick. Try to get him opportunities to get the football. Don't just send him on streaks downfield. This is what you do with like a 3rd round pick, a 4th round pick at wide receiver, or a part-time player. With a wide receiver 1 that you spent the 4th overall pick on, find ways to get this guy involved in your offense.
And I'm going to say this. I
23
talked
yards
about it.
away, by the way, Hutch.
Okay.
23 yards away.
Yeah.
Altoon currently holds the record in 1991 with 963 yards. So
Holy crap.
Trey McBride, based on what he's been averaging, he's 2 receptions away from setting that record as well.
Wow.
I'll say this, something we talked about prior to the season is that Drew Petzing, the offensive coordinator for the Cardinals, was a tight ends coach at one point for the Cleveland Browns. Like that has been his specialty, has been tight ends. And that was where the affinity for Trey McBride was coming from all throughout the offseason. I still remain a little bit worried about this offense and how much longer Drew Petzing is going to last in there, because it's not looking great.
Yeah.
Dave, let's go to the next one on here. You mentioned Jaden Daniels before. Commanders defeat the Saints. And this was it felt like this game you get the nice Terry McLaurin touchdown that happened early, and then everything else was kind of just like we were waiting for this game to just be over.
Yeah, it was pretty bad, especially Kamara, getting hurt. We talked about that a lot. That Kendre Miller was looking really, really good. That Alvin Kamara is 29, has a lengthy injury history, and hasn't been hurt yet this year. 2nd in the league in touches. And first of all, I mean, the play that he got hurt on was unbelievable. I don't know if you saw that. It looked like he had a glue trap stuck to his hand. The ball just stuck to it, and he was able to get 2 feet down, but unfortunately injured himself. And then we saw Kendre Miller come in after that injury and get 100% of the backfield touches. So that's my biggest takeaway. Kendre Miller, I talked about him last week being the number 1 guy I was targeting on waivers. And if you didn't listen last week, now you're going to be in a bidding war where you better hope you have some fab, because he's definitely the number 1 guy on waivers now heading into this week. And he looks good. I mean, he had one really, really bad drop yesterday that frustrated me, because last week, he displayed the nice hands. He had a nice one-handed catch. It was technically a lateral, but still, he was able to catch the ball. But that's my biggest takeaway, is that Kendre Miller right now is going to get a lot of work if Alvin Kamara can't go, and he's the number 1 waiver pickup for the week.
Yeah, Dave, is Miller available on waivers in the listener league, perchance? And there you got all the fab there.
I highly doubt it. Let me see. Let me
Check it up.
see.
That's good.
I'm with.
Nope. MK Schoner, my guy, he's got him already. The guy that I was playing in the final week of the season, so will not be getting Kendre there. Looks like I'll might as well blow all my money on Ty Johnson. I can't take it with me. Stone Smart's still available. Maybe that's who I'll spend it on.
I'm agreeing with you, Dave, that it's fully Kendre Miller time. Like, he's gonna be the guy. Jamal Williams has looked like complete dust this year. He just has not been the same guy. It's just not there. It's going to be Kendre Miller getting the opportunity in this backfield, and we've seen the burst, we've seen the explosiveness, we've seen the talent. I mean, this guy was, he had over 1,600 rushing yards in a season at TCU. I'm pretty sure, or was it 1,600 all-purpose yards? I'm
Purpose would be my guess. He was heavily involved in the receiving game.
Yeah, he was right around there in his last season at TCU. Like, he was a monster, and he was so talented. I really do believe it. I think this opportunity is going to be huge for him. So yeah, if he's available waivers, everything you got on him.
Yeah, and I honestly just even let's just to look forward into the future. If Kendre Miller has himself some big games here down the stretch, you got to think the Saints are sitting there wondering what they can do to maybe move Alvin Kamara to another team because this team is
Yeah,
is
man.
not in a good place financially. They're not in a place where they're competing. They got to do something
That
about
2-year
it.
extension is rough, man. They extended to that another contract. They're
I
they're
know.
paying they're already paying a lot of money. Like I don't know what the dead cap situation looks like, but I think they might be stuck with him with that contract that they signed him to.
Are
These
neither of you
teams,
guys fans of I Love You Man? Because I was
yes,
the only one that
everything you
smirked.
got, everything
Yeah,
you got. Yeah,
when
that's
Hutch
exactly what
said
I
to
was
just
hearing.
spend everything you got, everything you got. No, come
That's exactly what I
on,
was thinking.
Hutch,
I didn't want to go out on that branch by myself.
All right, I smirk. Hutch, you
I
got some
missed it.
homework to do. You got to watch I
Yeah.
Love You Man at
Okay,
some
I
Yeah,
point
love you,
this
man.
week.
Okay, I'll
It's
find
a,
it. I'll
it's
find
it's a
it.
good one. Good one.
All right.
Everything you got. You'll laugh when you watch this movie at some
All
point
right.
this week. I promise.
I'll find it. I'll find it.
All right, next game on here. Cowboys beat the Panthers. And my biggest takeaway from this one was not any specific one performance. Well, kind of one performance here. Rico Dowdle gets his third straight game of 100 plus rushing yards.
Yeah,
He's running
dude.
back 7 over the last 3 weeks. So he looks like he's going to be a league winner type of player that you drafted. And just leads me to this. 0 running back is still very much alive. And that strategy that everyone was saying was dead. Let's continue to draft the elder running backs. Let's get the big time running backs early. The Jonathan Taylors, the Travis Etiennes. It hasn't worked out. It hasn't worked out for everybody. And listen, I don't think there's any one strategy that is going to be every single year tried and true. But there's a reason these strategies come to be is because we kind of see how this happens as the year goes on. Running backs lose their value. The running backs that were getting the heavy touches start to break down. And that's why you see guys. I want to list you some of the best running backs that we have seen in fantasy football this year, all drafted in the 9th round or later. Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, J.K. Dobbins, Zach Charbonnet, Rico Dowdle. All of these guys have been great for fantasy, and especially a lot of them have been very hot as of lately. Chase Brown is like the running back 1 or 2 over the last 3 to 5 weeks here. He has been a guy that is just carrying fantasy teams, and I also think that a lot of these players has not only dispelled the notion that 0 RB is dead, but they've also dispelled the notion that a bad offense makes a running back lose their value here because some of these offenses have not been great. Obviously, you want
I mean, we've
as
seen
many
that
touches in
though.
a good offense.
How many times? Like we're like, especially if you're a pass catching running back on a bad offense. Like I think back, Hutch, this is before your time, but like Maurice Jones-Drew, Jacksonville
Mhm.
Jaguars were terrible, but he was just gobbling up like 5, 6 catches a game. And if you're in a
I like that
PPR
you've
league,
just made Hutch like 8 years old.
Hutch, you know Maurice Jones-Drew, right? Were you playing fantasy football then? I'm trying to think what
Maurice
he was
Jo
out of the league by
what year is that? Well, that was, I know
mid
that
two
name.
thousands, mid to early two
It's probably the
thousands.
year of our Lord 2008,
Mini
something like
to
that.
the I was probably around if it was 2008, I was 2 years old. But I do remember that name. I genuinely remember that
Nice.
name. When you said Maurice Jones-Drew, I was like, "I know
Now
that
you
name."
just know him
Well,
as
you
a
probably
little
know him
Pop
from
guy that's on
NFL
NFL
Network.
Network.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his last All Pro season was 2011. So, I
Okay.
mean, he was still, first team All Pro in 2011. But I mean, he was a guy. The Jacksonville Jaguars were just terrible. Hutch, like this team couldn't win a game, but it was Maurice Jones-Drew and Allen Robinson were just
Oh,
garbage
Robinson,
timing
yeah.
themselves to wide receiver 1 and RB1 finishes every single week, thanks to our Blake Bortles. But yeah, I mean, you don't
Mhm.
have to be a good team.
Yep.
And we're seeing that right now with Rico Dowdle, where he's just getting so many touches. It doesn't matter how bad the team is. But my takeaway from this game, Alfredo, is, and this is something Jeff Bell and I talked about on Friday, and I scoffed at Jeff Bell when he said, "Are you worried that Jalen Coker coming back is going to limit Adam Thielen's usage?" And I said, "No, not at all. He's an undrafted guy. I'm not worried about Jalen Coker. Adam Thielen's clearly the wide receiver 1 here. He's looked really good for the last few weeks, but silly me, Jalen Coker did kind of make Adam Thielen useless. Like we saw Adam Thielen in back-to-back games go for, averaging over 100 yards, looked really good. He was really involved. And then all of a sudden, Jalen Coker took over, and now he is kind of operating as the wide receiver 1 here. So I'm not saying that like you need to plug Jalen Coker into your lineups next week. I think that the production for the receivers here is just going to be really kind of hit and miss. But 4-6 for 110 yards and a touchdown. A lot of that did come on one big play, but Adam Thielen, who was looking like a plug and play league winner potentially down the stretch, now suddenly that shine has worn off a little bit.
I'll push back just ever so slightly, and it's that Jalen Coker ended up playing outside where Xavier Legette was, and Adam Thielen is going to remain in the slot. And I think a lot of it is just adjusting on the fly with Xavier Legette leaving the game. And I'm sure we'll still get some more Adam Thielen, especially if a defense is just looking. Now, this is something that could happen, Dave. Is defenses are just looking at this offense and saying, we just have to stop Adam Thielen and let Jalen Coker beat us. And if he can get the big play like he did this past week, then yeah, great.
Did
I
you
still think both
see
these guys.
Did you see the Xavier Legette clip from the St. Brown podcast? Did you guys get a chance to see that?
No.
He yeah,
It's
hold on. What did
amazing.
he say? What did he
Well, he's
say?
got two clips. The one where he's talking about eating raccoon,
Yes, eating
and
raccoon.
both
Yep.
of the
Oh,
brothers
good
are like
God.
slack jawed, just like, do you buy
What
this
a
at the store? And he's like, no. He's like, my cousin killed it, and we're just gonna eat it. And they're just like, but even better than that is when Amon St. Brown is talking about how badly he needed the Panthers to beat the Eagles, and then kind of blames the whole team, like, couldn't believe you guys couldn't come through. And then Legette just shakes his head. He's like, no, man, it was just all me. He's like, it was all me. I had plans that night. I
Oh,
canceled all my plans. And it's a really funny
oh my
clip where
God.
he is just totally taking ownership for the drop. Talking about how his like teammates come up to him celebrating and he's just laying on the ground and shaking his head like, no, guys, stop celebrating.
Oh, that sucks, dude.
Xavier Legette,
Oh,
man,
man.
national treasure.
Yeah.
Gotta
Wow.
protect him at all costs. All right, let's go on to the next game here. Hutch, the Bengals beat the Titans. It kind of didn't feel like a huge victory for the Bengals. I mean, there seems to be a lot of frustrations pouring over with this offense, with this team in general. Will Levis gets benched. What's the biggest takeaway from this one?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, it felt like a frustrating. You saw Joe Burrow multiple times on the sideline. Like, he seemed frustrated, man. There were a couple times where you saw him swearing, like getting mad with the coaching staff, throwing his tablet. Like, he was frustrated, even though the Bengals scored 37 points and won the game. There were 10 total turnovers in this game, most in a game since 2007, which is pretty crazy. And my main takeaway from this game is that Tyjae Spears is becoming a problem for Tony Pollard, man. Tyjae Spears had 2 goal line carries, converted on one of them, scored a touchdown, but it's not just goal line. Tyjae Spears, did you guys see Tyjae Spears' touchdown?
That
Did
was
you guys see
like
it?
the funniest touchdown I've ever seen.
Dude, it
Just
was
picked
so
up and
awesome.
carried by the team. Yeah.
Dude, he was sitting on top of the pile, just reaching his hand over. Like, the picture that was taken was absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, go find it. It was beautiful. But Tyjae Spears outsnapped Pollard in this game because the Titans fell behind, and he was used as receiving back. I believe he saw 7 targets. Pollard saw 0 targets. It seems like Spears is becoming more of the passing down back, and Spears has been unhealthy a lot this year. He's been in and out of the lineup, but it seems like he's back. He's ready to go, and it seems like this backfield is becoming more of a split. And Pollard becomes a guy now where he's similar to a Najee Harris, where you're getting 14 to 20 carries a game and you're dependent on a touchdown. And there's someone here taking a lot of receiving work. So Pollard becomes somebody that is not a secure start every week that we were feeling about him earlier this season, where he was getting more of a workhorse role.
I think that might be a little bit reactionary. I mean, Tony Pollard didn't practice at all this week. I think he
That's
was
fair
clearly
too. Yeah.
banged up. He didn't look
I
like
was
himself.
gonna say he was limping out there a little bit. Now that might continue to just continue lingering on into future weeks here.
Yeah, and that's definitely something to keep an eye out. I mean,
Yes.
I think Tony Pollard, his practice participation this week is going to really
That's a very fair
impact where
point.
I rank him. You know, if he's able to log limited practices early in the week, full practice on a Friday, I'm probably putting him right back in the top 12, top 15 like I have been all season. But if it's another week where he doesn't practice at all, then I'm dropping him deep into the the running back 3 ranks. So I think that was probably injury related, but yeah, Tyjae Spears getting almost all of the passing down work and all of the goal line work. That leaves Tony Pollard in a position that's just terrible for fantasy managers, where he's the RB1, but all of his touches are low calorie touches coming, in the run game between the 20s, and that's not what you want to see for fantasy football.
And I'll say this: if Mason Rudolph is going to be starting the rest of the way here for the
Ugh.
Titans, and they're just done with Will Levis, well, the offense might be bad, but he's a check down king. And if Tyjae Spears is the one that's out there, like, he becomes a guy that's, listen, if we just track the Tony Pollard injury
Potentially
news,
valuable,
he might become a guy that's really valuable on waivers. He's available in roughly 60% of leagues. So just go check your waiver wire.
Yeah,
See if he's there.
Chigakonkwo, 10 targets.
Yeah.
Oh, stop. I'm not doing this.
And also,
I'm not doing the Chigakonkwo thing.
Because the thing is, what are the Titans' next 2 matchups too? Because the Titans defense
It's Indy and Jacksonville. It's
Okay.
going to be some defenses that are not
Yeah.
that great.
Yeah, okay. Also, one last thing to point out from this game, I like to see the Bengals receiving room, Chase and Higgins. They've earned 51% of Joe Burrow's targets for the last 4 weeks. It's kind of feel like the Bengals offense has finally gotten to where it's supposed to be. These two guys getting monster target shares. They're going to be both great down the stretch for fantasy too. It's kind of feel like it's been really inconsistent with these receivers a lot of this season, but it's back now. It feels nice.
Do you guys see that they now are represented by the same agent?
Yes, that was fun to
T.
see
Higgins
too.
changed his agent to the same as Jamar Chase. So going into this offseason,
That's going to be fun.
It's going to be gross for Bengals fans. I think Chase ends up staying. Higgins ends up going elsewhere.
I would agree with that too. Yeah.
All right. Let's go. Next game on here. Dave, Ravens defeat the Giants. This was just kind of a funny one to watch. I'm not going to lie. Did I see that correctly? It's Tim Boyle who ended up in the game for the Giants at one point. Like this is how you tank properly, Giants. This is how you do it. This is how you go for the number 1 pick. Tim Boyle, I think, is responsible for more high draft capital than any other player in the NFL currently.
Sorry, I totally spaced out for a second. Sorry. I was trying to pull up the game. I'm trying to navigate between 3 different tabs to see what games we're talking about. Yeah, my takeaway from this game is just that Lamar Jackson is the MVP.
Okay, interesting. Over Josh Allen.
Over Josh Allen.
Okay.
Yeah. 5. Did you see the stat that he has 6 career games with 5 passing touchdowns and less than 5 incompletions? No other quarterback in NFL history has done that more than 3 times. I mean, it's just ridiculous what this guy does. And I think people get so enamored with the rushing that they don't realize that he is arguably the best passer in the NFL as well. And he's a weird passer because you will occasionally see him miss these wide open throws. Like we saw it early in the season, Isaiah Likely wide open in the end zone and just throws it over his head. We'll see, Justice Hill wide open in the flat, throws it over his head. And his haters, Lamar Jackson's haters, love to cling on to those handful of like misses that he has. But when he's on, there isn't a more unstoppable player in the NFL.
Dave, have you seen this? That Lamar Jackson's 3 interceptions this year
all came on tip passes.
Tip passes, yeah.
Yes, all fell off the hands of his. So one is through Rashad Bateman's hands, another one through Mark Andrews' hands, and another one taken away from Justice Hill. Those are the 3 interceptions. So I think there's a big case for it. What was the last time we had a back-to-back MVP?
Aaron Rodgers, just 4 years ago.
Just a few years ago.
Aaron Rodgers was 2 years ago. That feels so much
longer. 3 and 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Or was it 2 and 3 years ago?
Honestly, with how bad everything has been with Aaron Rodgers, it feels like it was 8.
Yeah, I mean, he was back-to-back MVP. Then he had 1 down year in Green Bay, and then he went to the Jets. Like that fall off happened quick.
Fast. Yeah.
Feels like it was a millennia ago. All right. Derrick Henry, we still drafting him in the first round next year. Is that something we're doing?
Somebody will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not me.
Somebody will do it.
Conclusion on that one. Good conclusion on that one. Okay. Next game on here. Texans beat the Dolphins. This was a frustrating game. And I told you that I was going to start some beef between players, and I'm going to do it right now. I think that the build between the Miami Dolphins here on offense, I think it's broken. I think the whole team is broken. I think this is it's a bad team in general. All this money invested into players like Jalen Ramsey, who can't cover, Tyreek Hill, who can't catch anymore. This coach, Mike McDaniels, who's not really drawing up great schemes. Jalen Waddle, who can't stay healthy. This is the connection between Tua and Tyreek doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. This is a team that needs to be broken down. I'm going to read off some of the numbers here for you. Tua and Tyreek in week 15, a 28.6% completion rate. A lot of that has to do with Derek Stingley, but this isn't like it's the first game where Tyreek has and Tua have not had the connection. This has been something where also, by the way, Tua 82% completion rate with everyone else in the field. JJ Zacharyson pointed out something this morning on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. Over the last 10 weeks, Jonnu Smith, 76 targets, Tyreek Hill, 73 targets. When your highest paid player on the offense, that's not a quarterback, is out here getting less targets than Jonnu Smith, your offense is broken. Your team is broken. It doesn't work. Either Tyreek Hill is cooked or he's injured. Did you guys see the play where he's out here kicking a ball instead of trying to actually catch it?
Mm-hmm.
The ball, it was roughly hip level. And all the effort it took for him to go kick the ball, he absolutely could have just reached down and grab it. It's just, he gets the ball ripped away by Derek Stingley at the end. It's just not there. It's not there. Even in big games for the Dolphins, the playoffs, against the Bills, anything like that, Tyreek just doesn't show up. I think this team's done. I think this team's done. They need to rip it apart.
I think Mike McDaniel is the problem, man. Like, I don't understand.
I would agree.
Like,
I would
why
agree.
are we force feeding touches to Raheem Mostert? Like, every time I watched Raheem Mostert carry the ball yesterday, my love for the game just died a little bit because, like, he is just so beyond washed, and, like, 8 carries for 6 yards, I think that's what he had, or was it 6 carries for 8 or whatever it was terrible, like,
Something like that, yeah.
I had to sit here, like, I'm watching this sputtering offense on an offense that, yeah, Jalen Waddle was knocked out with an injury, but they still have Tyreek Hill, they still have Johnny Smith, they still have Devon Achane, and they're just force feeding the ball on an entire drive to Raheem Mostert. Like, I can't imagine a quicker way to kill a drive. I don't get it. Mike McDaniel,
Yeah.
I think he did some really innovative things, and I think that a lot of the league has now followed suit, and now defenses have adjusted, and I think the things that kind of put Mike McDaniel on the map have just within 2 years already become outdated philosophies, and he just refuses to change.
Well, and
The
he's
inability
limited
to
to what
take
he
deep
can do.
shots.
He's
Yeah,
limited to what he can do with Tua.
right.
Tua's not the guy that extends plays. He's not the guy that you want to be rolling out and having him running plays like this, throwing the ball deep as often. It's got to be quick stuff. It's broken.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is systemically broken in Miami.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is.
All right,
Oh, sorry, Alfredo.
go for it. No, go for it, Hutch. We only got one game left, so you got it. Go.
Sure. One last thing I wanted to add. I know where this is mostly a redraft show, but for dynasty purposes, I'm actually starting to get a little worried about Devon Achane. I tweeted this earlier this week that look, Miami has not been able to run the football. I mean, as simple as that. And they keep stuffing Achane up the middle, and it's not working. And they have Mostert and Wright. They have not been good this year at all. And the 2025 NFL draft class is really strong. And Achane's someone that you get in receiving game, you get in space on the outside. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to get like a day two guy that they could put up the middle to get some more like running work to help get this run game going. And I think this could limit Achane in fantasy just a little bit. So I just a dynasty take I want to throw out there that I wouldn't be surprised if Miami took a big name running back in this draft.
They need something. They need something because this just doesn't work. All right, I got it out. I feel better, guys. I feel a lot better. All right, last game on here. Jets beat the Jaguars. I was feeling really good about this one because the Jets were losing at one point, and I was just kind of, smiling as I was doing things and watching these games. The Jets come back and win, and Devontae Adams has potentially the best second half of football that any player has ever had in the history of the NFL or just sports in general. Hutch, biggest takeaway from this one?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from this one is I know the Jaguars end up losing, but I actually think, and we like to meme Mac Jones a little bit. I think he's a player that's gotten, to a meme status in the NFL a little bit with how bad he played in New England. He's okay enough for this offense for the fantasy options here. Brian Thomas Jr. has 75 or more receiving yards in 4 or 5 games with Mac Jones, 10 plus targets in each of the last 3 weeks. Jones is looking his way. And Thomas Jr. is good enough at football to make it work for fantasy. He's done really well for fantasy with Jones on the field. And also, I'll shout out Travis Etienne as well. Mac Jones, man, he's dumping the football off to Etienne. Etienne has at least 10 plus rush attempts in 4 of his last 5 and 3 plus receptions in 4 of his last 5 as well. He hasn't been a monster for fantasy. We've only seen a couple games go over 10 PPR fantasy points. But if you have some rushing work, you have some receiving work, that's good enough to deem him as, a flex-worthy asset in fantasy. A lot of people have been really, really concerned about him. But it seems like Mac Jones gives him the football in the receiving game, and that makes him a really solid option in the receiving for fantasy. And 2 really good running back matchups are coming up. When you look at sleeper, they're both very green for running backs. So I'm looking at ETN as a potential, flex play, somebody that you don't have to bench all of a sudden because Mac Jones is dumping the football off to him.
And we saw that 2 weeks ago where, ETN got almost no work because, Bigsby was the one getting all of
Yeah,
it and when they had the lead. So I think, it's really tough trying to project and predict game script, but in games where it's going to be close or where they're going to be trailing, I think there will be enough passing down work for ETN. Um, but I don't even know if this is a takeaway, but was there like a part of you that almost felt like Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams were, like, trolling Jets fans, or is that just, like, the perception I
It
have of Aaron
really
Rodgers?
does.
yeah, a
It's like,
little bit.
purposely have done, like, nothing all season, and then just for, like, half of football, like, like, you almost wonder if they had a conversation on the sideline, like, "You know what? Let's just go out there and have some fun," and they looked like the Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams connection from 5 years ago, like, they were unstoppable. The back shoulder catches, the toe taps, the yards after the catch, I mean, they they looked exactly like they did in their prime, and it's like, where has this been all year? Like, you guys traded midseason for Devontae Adams. He's had a handful of splash plays here and there, but, like, I think this is what people expected when they made that trade, and, of course, the Jets just waited till they're 3-11 and halfway through a game now trying to, get pole position for a good draft pick, and then Aaron Rodgers says, "No, no, we're gonna go out here and win this game, and Devontae Adams is gonna look like the superstar you wanted him
Yeah,
to be."
unbelievable, man,
Eh,
unbelievable.
The Jets feel like the most trolly team in the NFL. Like
Breece
they
Hall
can.
coming back? Why was Breece Hall even playing in this game?
I don't
He
get it.
shouldn't play the rest of the season. He shouldn't play the rest of the season. You're out of playoff contention. The Jets did this last year where they gave Breece Hall like 30 touches.
Because their mathematician had the wrong numbers. He's like, we had to get him to 1,000 yards. And they're like, well, he got 991.
What are we doing? Like, who cares, man? Like, all you're doing is hurting these players. Garrett Wilson seems really frustrated despite catching a touchdown in this game. It's just,
Yeah. You mean
I
back?
think the best part is that the Jets are going to run it back. I really do. I really think
No,
that's
Yeah, they
it
might,
sounds
man.
like there's already been so many reports that, and I mean, maybe because if Rodgers and
They might.
Adams just
They
stay
might. If
red
they
hot
win.
for the rest of this season, they're going to extend Adams and they're going to extend Rodgers. But
Going
I
to do
mean,
it till he's 90.
yeah, the reports 2 years ago were that like there's no way Rodgers is coming back. This team wants a fresh slate. But now, like, Jets fans are going to watch that game yesterday and be like, ooh, we should try this again next year. And, it's probably going to be another 5-12 season or whatever.
People forgetting though, this is against the Jacksonville Jaguars, dude. Arguably the worst defense in football. Like this is not
And
good.
it's funny how good the Jags and Jets can look when they get to face off against each other's defense.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Seems
And we say
hard
that
to
all the
see.
time. Like, two good teams are really fun to watch, but two really bad teams facing off against each
Yeah.
other sometimes make for some really fun
It's
football
fun, man.
yesterday too. And you got Mac Jones out here doing the Rizzler celebration, and it was a weird game, man. I do not want to see Mac Jones in his bag like that. It just made me uncomfortable.
Dude, Jones
That
Jones was talking so much trash too. You
I
see him on
know.
the field, he was celebrating. He got in so many defenders' faces. I was like, dude, if you talk to the wrong defender, you're gonna get knocked out. Like, be careful, man.
He is
Mac-
up there with Jameis Winston as being like the most unintentionally hilarious player, but like for completely opposite reasons.
no,
He's just so
worst
cringy that you
reasons.
can't help
He's
but laugh.
cringy. Mac Jones
Yeah.
is every 40-year-old guy at the rec center that finally hits a shot going 1 for 12 from 3-point, and then he just gets in the defender's face. Like, you
Yep.
better guard me. You better guard me. Don't leave me open. That's Mac Jones.
You're gonna see all of the
Wow.
50-year-old guys with the bald head and the sweatband at the YMCA throwing out the Rizzler celebration today after hitting a corner
Oh,
three.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. Is that so? I'm not that cool, Dave. The Rizzler celebration, was that after he got like a first down and he did this like weird looking thing with his hand? Was that
Yeah,
what it was?
it's like you're supposed to like kind of follow the jawline. That's like the
It was just like
celebration.
you stuck in
It's
your
this-
cheeks, and then it makes your jawline
Yeah.
look bigger.
It's like this chunky
Oh,
little
God.
7-year-old. They've got him all
Yeah.
hopped up on red food dye and corn syrup.
No,
I'll
yeah, I
send you
know he
videos
is.
after the show.
He's this generation's Honey Boo Boo. Like that's what we're
Yeah,
at.
pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bro.
But
Yeah.
also came out with a rap song, and low-key
Yes,
has
he
some
did.
bars. Gotta say,
Banger?
yeah,
It's a banger?
man.
Yeah, it will be
All right,
on my
next,
Spotify rap next year for sure as my top song.
Oh my
I was
god.
gonna say maybe next episode we just sit here and we rank rap songs, and yeah, I'm in. I'm down. Speaking of that, we're gonna be back again tomorrow with the Waiver Wire show. This was a good one, man. Good way to recap this week and look at what's going to help us going forward and maybe into next season here. If you made it through the fantasy playoffs or if you're sweating it out tonight, best of luck to you as we keep going forward here. Dave and I are going to be back, like I said, for the Waiver Wire. We're going to be back for the Start Sit show. We got the Sunday morning live show coming up as well. Dave's going to be back on Friday with the news and injury updates. And then, no, he's not. He's letting me know that's not happening.
No,
We have
Alfredo,
got
trying
that
to make
Aaron
me do
Rodgers.
more work than I'm supposed
We've got
to.
that Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson connection going right here.
Uh-huh.
It's great. Yeah, we're good 1 out of every 6 times. But yeah, that's it, guys. We got 2 more weeks left of the fantasy football season. As always, want to thank you guys for watching, listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, for Hutch. We'll see you next time. Adios.